What is up, world? It's your boy Tan, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. Alrighty, welcome back, people. I got Slocomb Reed with me today, a longtime friend. He is a badass in Cincinnati. He was actually the first guy that I met in my investing journey. He was my realtor, got me into my first duplex. We'll get into that story later. But Slocomb, real quick, why don't you give us a quick synopsis, background of who you are, what you're doing now, and how that is relating to real estate.
Todd, for the record, you had to talk me into helping you buy that first duplex. I had to talk you into buying the second duplex. I'm taking credit for the second one. You made money on the first one, but that was more about you and the timing of the market. But I'm taking credit for the second one. Y'all took some convincing on that. My name is Slocomb. Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Tom. It feels like we should have done this a while ago. I am as an investor, I'm primarily buy and hold, single family and multifamily. And as my day-to-day currently is the operation of that portfolio and the third-party management portfolio that we have as well. So my company is Three Little Pigs, or TLP. We currently manage just over 470 units at just over 100 addresses all across greater Cincinnati. That's Ohio and Kentucky. We've got in-house maintenance, house renovations, construction management. We are, continuing to grow. Got some good things going on.
Love that. So I want to back up to before how you got to here, right? But first, before even that, Three Little Pigs. Does that come from the old children's story, The Three Little Pigs?
Yes, obviously.
Okay.
So let me give you a quick version. Back in the day, pre-real estate, I had an Amway business, and there's a very famous speaker from Amway named Dave Severin. All his best stuff was from the 80s, and not his most famous talk, not even his most famous talk about pigs, but he had one called "The Three Little Pigs is Not a Fairy Tale," and it was his main message in that talk, that Amway talk from stage at some event in the 80s, was that everyone is going through life either as the pig who builds a house of straw, house of sticks, house of bricks. And you don't want to be the one who's just trying to get off easy and do whatever is necessary so that you can relax. And you don't want to be the one who's just following the crowd. You want to be the one who knows that you're doing what it takes to make sure that your family is safe and that you can take care of your people whenever whatever big bad wolf comes. So that's what I was thinking about when I started my first LLC, which was My House of Bricks, and that's where TLP came from.
Love that. Okay. So before you got to the point where you're managing 470 units now, you were also an agent. Obviously, you were my agent. And you had a really big name around the Cincinnati area at all the networking events, etc. So what were you doing back then? I know you did some buy and holds back then, but it was more so in the single family realm, right? Outside of being an agent. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, it was more small multifamily. So before real estate, was not exactly a high income earner. I was a professional youth minister. And so when I got into real estate full time, as an investor, I was not coming at it from the perspective of needing tax advantage vehicles to put all of my capital in, because I didn't have that much capital. And I didn't need as many tax advantages as I was getting some of those years, because I didn't have really high income that required some of the fancy stuff you can do with real estate. So I focused on BRRRR deals, and it was mainly small multi 2 to 4 unit buildings at the start. Single families actually came later. But the thing that was most attractive to me was the opportunity to cash out refi, keep the property, have some cash flow, continue to participate in appreciation, increasing cash flow over time. After I have all my money back, so I didn't have all that much money at the time, but I wanted to build a portfolio. So it was that through 2018. In 2018, I sold Brandon Turner a 24 unit out in Cleves, more west side than where you grew up.
Yeah.
And then I gave a talk at the best ever meetup here locally about like top three things I learned from representing Brandon Turner or something like that. And one of the guys who came to that came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, sounds like you should be my realtor." I said, "Great." And then after I sold him his first duplex, which was the same situation as your second, same builder, burned out, fabulous floor plan in a sketchy area. He started crushing it with that duplex, but then he pitched to me that if I let him in on my Burr deals, he would bring all the capital and we'd split them 50-50. That was my first JV. Since then, he and I actually now own the building I sold to Brandon Turner in 2018, and that ended up being a Burr deal as well. We bought it from him in late 2019. But I've had several JV partnerships that way. That's been a lot of how the portfolio has scaled until more recently. Much easier for me to take things down by myself now than it used to be. But it was Burr deals, getting my capital back out so that I could redeploy it in another building because my capital was limited, and then bringing on JV equity partners so that I had access to their capital and could do more deals with the two of us together.
So would you say that that 24 unit that you bought from Brandon Turner was pretty much the catalyst into larger deals?
That was a big part of it. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. And that was the first property where it felt like I was getting into C class multifamily. It was built in 78, but it's small, one bedroom apartments in Cleves. That thing has financially performed like a dream ever since. I mean, we bought it with 15 tenants out of the 24 units, and only 9 of them wanted to pay rent, so we had plenty of work to do up front, but it's working really well now. And I would say, yeah, that was my biggest property. Before that was a 6 unit, so that was really the jump, and that was definitely a catalyst for getting into more commercial multifamily.
With the 6 units and smaller multis that you had prior to, were you self-managing those or was it third party?
I've always self-managed.
Okay.
So I mean, my first rental property was my house hack. My wife's and my starter home was a 4-family, live in one, rent out the other 3, and ever since then, I've been self-managing. Yeah.
And then the 24 unit and everything now is also self-managed, correct?
Yes. The 24 unit is when I started having to take bringing on team members more seriously. So when we took on the 24 unit is when I hired my first full-time virtual assistant outside of lead gen, just hammer dialing, cold calls, text messages, whatever. Um, Operationally for bookkeeping, stuff like that, answering all of the inquiries on the listings. But yeah, so that was when I needed to professionalize, start delegating some tasks, hiring some people, because that property took my portfolio to 40 units, and I was still a full-time agent at the time. And so it was really more that I had to figure out how to delegate the things that were outside of my strengths and the low dollar activities.
As of now, I know you have like your own HVAC company and as well as your property management company that manages your own portfolio as well as other people's portfolio. So, did you during that like time frame of, getting that 24 unit and then everything else after that, did you have to build relationships with these contractors in order to continually build up, contractors for the HVAC company that eventually became a company, and then a property management team, like like you said, your VA and maybe a couple foremen, etc.
There's definitely a through line here, Ton, of understanding the value of scale. So with that 24 unit, that was the first time, like you said, that I started developing real contractor relationships and started working with contractors who were expecting that they were going to get a call from me pretty often and that they could rely on me. So yes, and finding the right contractors helps that I speak Spanish. I've lived in Latin America and worked there. So getting good quality work done affordably has I have a bit of an advantage there in the Cincinnati market. It's not many of us in this industry who speak fluent Spanish, but uh, another thing that I figured out pretty quickly, Ton, was that if I was going to be stuck relying on third-party contractors, my work was getting done on their timeline, not on mine. And so as the portfolio continued to scale, my emphasis shifted. It was in the fall of 2021. It was 2 years after we bought that 24 unit that my focus shifted to bringing those things in-house and getting people working for me full time. In some cases W-2 and some 1099, but knowing that for them, the maintenance people, rehabbers, they knew they didn't need anybody else. They didn't need to go find any other clients because I was going to keep them busy full time and well paid. And I knew these people were going to go wherever I told them to go, when I told them to go, and they were going to do what I told them to do, if that makes sense. So I shifted as hard as I could out of third-party contractor relationships as soon as I had the scale to keep people busy full time. That made us a lot more efficient, especially in, multifamily operations. It's a whole lot of little projects. On the one hand, it's like the toilet flapper and the leak into the apartment downstairs and a lot of little stuff like that. But even, our unit turns, some of them are just one person for 1 or 2 days. And so I need to keep people bouncing around all the time. It's a lot easier to do that with people who are expecting to know from me what they're doing every day and that they'll get paid well for it, than trying to scramble third-party contractors with requests and, little couple $100 unit turns and things like that.
Also, I completely agree with you. It's really hard to find good people to work for you nowadays. Third parties and
For sure.
contractors in general, plus the timelines, right?
Yeah. So we've, with the amount of growth that we've had recently, we've losing sight of some of the numbers. It's been a lot. So we went into the summer of 2022 with my 90 units being the entire portfolio because we weren't really doing third party yet. And so a little over 3 years later, we're at 470. So we've 5x'd in the last 3 years.
Hell yeah.
And there are a couple of times in there where we doubled or tripled within 12, 15. And so we're back to the point of needing a lot of third-party contractors to get a lot of our unit turns and other projects done. Because the flip side of that coin is I need to know that I can keep people who work for me exclusively busy. And so I am focused on having the right number of people on payroll, whether it's W-2 or 1099, and knowing that I'm keeping them busy, but also knowing that I have a big bench when it comes to third-party contractors. We get into peak season or we get a few more significant rehabs, and I can go to the bench and get a lot more units turned, a lot more work done quickly, knowing that we can coordinate more people than we have the people.
Yeah. So with now having, your own contractor slash your management team, right? That's a whole nother side of the business. So how difficult was it to implement, like, call it standard operating procedures to get your operations kind of efficientized? I don't know if that's a word or not, but more efficient.
Yeah, you haven't cussed yet in this interview, so I guess you get to make up words, right, Tom?
Right.
So it's a process, and I'm not a natural at building SOPs. I'm not going to say that ours are perfect. I think AI is already helping a lot with that. We have a TLP ChatGPT account, and a bunch of people who work for me have paid accounts with ChatGPT through TLP so that we can collaborate within the GPT platform. I'd say the biggest thing is that I've had to spend a lot of time figuring out what could be delegated, finding the right person or the right type of person to delegate it to. And then, especially the last couple of years, I've had to focus on slowing down and spending a week minimum getting new people up to speed so that they know enough about what we're doing and they know enough about their role that they can really be useful, and then come in and supplement what they were trained on in their first week when they're. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I can't say that we have the best set of documented SOPs. We have a really solid culture within the company, and there are a lot of people who are in a position to help the people who come in new. We do have pretty good onboarding program. So there are some things that they have to figure out on their own. There are a lot of people that they can ask for help, and they get a good foundation within their first week.
Okay, so you mentioned you had a VA previously, but outside of your VA, which role would you say was either your first hire or your highest ROI hire?
The highest ROI hire, I would say that it's a lot harder to answer that question now. I mean, well, we're implementing EOS, like working with an EOS coach. If you've heard of the book Traction by Gino Wickman, it's his company. We have an officially licensed EOS coach through EOS Worldwide. And my three most important rocks for this quarter are all hiring people. Because we've identified that those are the places where bringing someone else on the team is going to lead to the highest ROI for the company. So I could say those three. That's a whole process. We have a leadership team now that discusses these things on a regular basis. Early on, it was really every hire had a significant ROI, because especially in the beginning, it went from me doing everything to me giving half of the hours to somebody else. Half of the effort coming from somebody else, allowing me to focus on the big picture, the things that require experience and specialized knowledge. And so really, man, that first one, the first administrative assistant, my first local hire was full-time, effectively like property manager's assistant, something like that. Even when the portfolio is only like 60, 90 units, there's a lot of errands that got to be run, especially because we had stuff in, I mean, Loveland and Cleves and downtown and Mount Washington at that point. So for those of you who are not from the Cincinnati area, imagine that you could need to be in the car for 45 minutes to go just from one property to another without traffic. And so being able to delegate all the errand running was big, and delegating the errand running to someone who also had some natural charisma, sales skills, great at showing apartments. That was big, because that allowed me to focus, especially early on when I was still trying to be a full-time agent while doing this at the same time. That allowed me to focus on sales. You know, another piece of it is that early on, as I was building the operating business, TLP, I was hiring people to show apartments so that I could spend that time working with my buyer and seller clients, finding properties, negotiating deals, and doing things that were a much better dollars per hour use of my time, even outside of TLP. So really, I mean, the highest ROI, I would say, comes early on, because, you know, it feels like you're the single cell organism that finally figures out how to split itself. And now there are two of you, and you can get twice as much work done. You should only be delegating the lowest skilled, least experienced work, but still you've got twice as much stuff going on as soon as you figure out how to hire that first person full time.
It sounds like you're the fucking visionary, brother. And
There it is.
I don't know if you've read Who Not How, but you're like a living example of that right now.
Yeah, Benjamin Hardy. That's a that's
or
a
no,
good
Dan
book,
Sullivan.
for sure.
Dan Sullivan.
Yeah, I think Benjamin Hardy was his writer.
Oh, okay.
For the Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. Yeah, Who Not How.
Got it. Yeah. Another really good book I just read by Benjamin Hardy is The Science of Scaling. It might be.
Oh, nice. I haven't read that one yet.
I'll send it over to you. I got the
Cool.
PDF. Yeah. So okay. So you're implementing Traction. You're the visionary. Your integrator is probably a partner of yours. Yes.
Right now
or
it's me.
You're still the integrator as well.
With regards to the operating business, yes, that's me.
So you're figuring out how to find the integrator and split yourself off that way, so you can actually truly be a visionary.
Yeah. That'll be the next hire that will have been the highest ROI for sure.
Perfect. Okay, so let's look at that. What does that person look like? Now, firstly, yeah, what does that person look like? And two, well, I guess answer that first, and then we'll kind of dig into your idea of like the perfect partner.
Well, right now, that perfect integrator is a fucking unicorn. So that's like, when I figured that out, I went through the process of looking at fractional integrators, hiring an integrator full time. And I realized that based on where we were in business, I am still so involved, not at a necessarily boots on the ground level, but I am the lieutenant within too many departments of this company. Too many things are running based on my ability to know everything that's going on, make all of the decisions, have the expertise. So I recently hired a maintenance supervisor, and I definitely hired the right person. It's been phenomenal to know once we got to this point that everything was being handled, everything was being appropriately prioritized, and I didn't have to be in the day-to-day of it. I still get a few questions, but I don't have to know what's going on. Based on all the parts of the business that I still have to be involved in day-to-day, I would need, if I was going to step away from operations and the day-to-day of the business in general, I would need an integrator who's not only excellent at running a company, but also has all of the understanding of real estate that I have, that the company is relying on. And when I figured out how hard it would be to find someone like that, and I know one of those people, how much I would have to pay her to come work for me, that's when we decided and my EOS coach is in agreement with this, we needed to go find the lieutenants. So before we hire one person who's running the company for me the way that an integrator does for a visionary, I need to have a few more leadership level people or departmental leadership level people who have the skills and experience within their niche of real estate investing. I need to have those people in place first. And then when my expertise in real estate is no longer required to be running the business, I can go get an integrator who is an expert at running operating businesses, running companies, and doesn't have to know as much about real estate as I've had to learn in the last decade. Because they'll have the people reporting to them who have those skills and expertise, and they can focus on making the company run like a well-oiled machine, making sure all the trains arrive on time. And I'll have leaders within maintenance, renovation, leasing, finance, including the tenants finance, AP and AR for our landlord clients, of course. I'll have people in each of those departments within the company taking care of the day-to-day so that the integrator doesn't need to be a specialist in all those things the way that I've had to become.
So working towards getting, again, like I'm stealing your word here, but the lieutenants to get them in like those management leadership roles so that the integrator that comes in really only needs to know how to operate a business and not necessarily a real estate business, because all the managers really already know their place and what they need to do. Yes?
Yes. There's a lot of regulation in real estate, especially primary residence real estate. And there are a lot of nuances to the ways that we do things. Another thing about a property management business is that in a lot of ways, we're an intermediary. We are in between the landlord and the tenant. And so there are a lot of things that are easier about this business than others, but there are a lot of things that are more complicated. And there are a lot of people out there who know how to run a successful industry agnostic company. And the talent pool who could successfully run TLP as my integrator gets amazingly larger when they don't have to have all the real estate investing experience.
And that wraps up the first part of my conversation with Slocomb. Tune in again next week for even more badass insights from Slocomb. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.